for me. Hello? How is this the Christian sex book?
So, picking up from last time, this episode is going to wrap up the last 5 books of the Tanakh, or Old Testament, that we haven't covered yet, which are Daniel, Job, Ecclesiastes, Song of Songs, Song of Solomon, and Lamentations. Daniel doesn't have much mention of women, but Daniel was a eunuch, which is to say he had his dick cut off, so he could serve in the house of the Babylonian king. Lamentations is basically more of last episode with all the whining and crying about our lives suck, how come God never helps us, and stuff like that.
That sounds like really, of all the Bible, like books, that sounds really relevant to me. And you probably as well. Very Hellenistic.
The book of Job has 7 quote-unquote real women in it, or at least they're portrayed as real in the narrative of the story. At the beginning of the story, Job has a wife, 7 sons, and 3 daughters. God makes a bet with Satan, and Satan kills Job's kids. In the last chapter, Job gets a new 10 kids, 7 sons and 3 daughters, same as he had before. Interestingly, the book doesn't name any of his sons, but it does name the second set of 3 daughters, Jemimah, Keziah, and Keren-Happuch. It then goes on to say in Job chapter 42 verse 15, "And in all the land there were found no women so fair as the daughters of Job, and their father gave them an inheritance among their brothers." So we can infer from that it was unusual in this time for women to inherit property, since that was specifically mentioned by the authors as, something that happened. This could also indicate that the authors of Job were not quite as misogynistic as some of their contemporaries. However, I wouldn't say they were too in favor of women thinking. Job's wife apparently is a bit more upset about the loss of all their stuff and their children at the hands of Satan. And so she tells Job in Job chapter 2, starting at verse 9, "Do you still hold fast to your integrity? Blaspheme God and die." But he said unto her, "You speak as one of the impious women speaks. What, shall we receive good at the hands of God, and shall we not receive evil? And for all this, he is not blaspheming God." Blaspheming God is the sin that he would be committing. And what it's saying is that he does not blaspheme God. He is accepting his role in life.
Is this book something that the Calvinists often referred to? Because it sounds a lot like their kinds of ideology. Like predestination, oh well, life sucks.
Yeah, I'm not sure whether or not the Calvinists specifically used it, but it is definitely very much in line with their kind of ideology that God is not necessarily bad, but we ought to accept our fate, and that, we have no choice in our afterlife. It's a very, very Hellenistic book. It's almost unique in the biblical canon, because while you have other people like Moses or Ezekiel or David talking back to God, contradicting him and asking him questions with varying levels of success, Job's authors felt that it wasn't the place of humans to question or to judge God, and that we should just accept that we are fated to be nothing more than pawns in his game. We are nothing more than pieces on the chessboard that is God. To the authors of Job, that is the entire meaning of our existence. So if God and the demigods decide to place bets on our behavior and to cause us suffering, we should just accept that. That's just our fate. However, Job does say that he wishes he wasn't born. In Job chapter, I believe it's 2, starting at verse 11, "Why died I not from the womb? Why did I not perish at birth?" So what he's saying there is basically that he wishes that he had been stillborn instead of living and suffering like he is right now. He's very, kind of depressed.
It would be interesting to see how the prosperity gospel preachers would spin this or try to de-emphasize this book, because this book is basically, if life sucks, you accept it, whereas the prosperity gospel is all about, no, you can get whatever you want, and God wants you to get whatever you want. This sounds like the exact opposite. They probably never reference it.
Yeah, no, I can't imagine the prosperity gospel preachers mentioning this very much. Because, yeah, it is very anti their ideology. It's very much about just accepting fate, not trying to fight back, not trying to petition God for a different fate. It's just you accept your fate. The fate that God has given you, that is your fate. You accept it. There's nothing else that you can do about it.
Like, so painstakingly, like, theological gymnastics. Like, they have just, like, it's sometimes, this is veering off, but sometimes we're watching these preachers, I know you've had this experience too, and you're just like, you see them have to struggle with this verse, and this verse goes either shows Yahweh to be completely anti-human and completely just thoughtless in the way that he treats, quote, his people. And they have to try to, because their ideology is God is love, so they have to try to torturously, squeeze, like, a little ounce of, like, take one word and go from there, and everyone just nods their heads. Yep, amen. Yep.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I have seen that so much. And I think that kind of that's why this series and, this project is so important to me, because it provides me with a kind of cathartic release where I get to kind of let all that anger out and address the texts as they are, and for the historical and political context in which they were written, instead of trying to fit them to an ideology, instead of trying to just make them fit my predetermined beliefs. Each of his friends seems to represent a different school of ancient Judaism, and Job himself seems to represent a Hellenistic or a Greek view of God. This might have been performed by actors or scholars on holy days or the Sabbath.
Oh, I was going to ask you about that, so that's so interesting that it does. When I read over this, that came to mind. And it's kind of...
Yeah, very much. And it's also like the morality plays of the medieval and Greek world, to teach philosophy and to answer philosophical questions for the illiterate masses. Job's friend Eliphaz brings up the more common Jewish view, the Pharisees, the school of thought that became modern Judaism. Seems to be what Eliphaz is representing. And he says that if humans suffer, it's because we angered God with our sins, and he urges Job to repent and to offer sacrifices, which were, again, a major part of the Jewish tradition, especially the Pharisee tradition. Eliphaz also gives Job the promise of God's comfort if he repents, like we saw was a common motif in the last episode when we were talking about the prophets. He says in Job chapter 5, verse 17, "Behold, happy is the man whom God correcteth. Therefore despise not thou the chastening of the Almighty. For who he maketh sore, he bindeth up. Who he woundeth, his hands make whole." Eliphaz seems to think that God is ultimately good, and that all the things that God does that don't seem good to us are our fault.
That's a little dramatic. Yeah, and like Hellenistic choruses were probably drama queens, I would think, because they're just like, oh, death,
Job says that he wishes God would just kill him already so he could die happy, knowing that he hadn't questioned the order of things and his own place in the universe. He says, Oh that I might have my request, and that God would grant me the thing that I long for. Even that it would please God to crush me, that he would loose his hand and cut me off. Then should I yet have comfort. Yea, I would exult in pain, though he spare not, for I have not denied the words of the Holy One. So he's saying, I wish that I was dead, so at least I would know that I died accepting God's will.
This person, he's just like the classic paralyzed neurotic. Oh, woe is me, the world is conspiring against me. And in Job's situation, it actually is. But in people who we see these symptoms in, it's usually not. But I have friends like this. We all know people like this. The classic neurotic who, it's a negative narcissism. Everything has to do with you in a negative way. You are at fault for everything. You're so bad. Everything happens to you. That's the topic of conversation all the time. He reminds me of those people. The difference is he actually has reasons.
Yeah, and I think that kind of lends a sort of credibility to a lot of religious people who might believe that this is the actual situation that they are in, instead of realizing that no, this is actually, all in their heads, which is unfortunate because it prevents them from going to get help. Bildad, who is another of Job's friends, says that it may not be Job's sins that he's being punished for. In his view, God will sometimes punish entire families or nations for the sins of a minority. Job says that he knows that God is kind of malevolent like that, but it's not his place as a human to judge, and that he has no way to hold God accountable, even if he did judge God as immoral. He says in Job chapter 9, verse 24, "The earth is given into the hand of the wicked. He covereth the faces of the judges thereof," which means God is directly perverting justice. God is directly getting in the way of judges doing a fair job. And he says, "If it be not he, then who is it? He is not a man as I am that I should answer him," which is to answer his challenge in a duel or a trial by ordeal. He says that we should come together in judgment. There is no arbiter between us who might lay his hand upon both of us, meaning there's no one to punish God if God is found guilty. Job then repeats his wish that he was dead again. "Wherefore then hast thou brought me forth out of the womb? Would that I had perished, and no eye had seen me. I should have been as though I had not been. I should have been carried from the womb to the grave. Are not my days few, especially compared to God's? Cease then, and let me alone, that I might take comfort a little. Before I go whence I shall not return, even to the land of darkness and the shadow of death, a land of thick darkness, as darkness itself, a land of the shadow of death, without any order, where the light is as darkness." Job doesn't seem to believe in an afterlife per se. He seems to believe in there's just the grave and that's it. Zophar finds this doctrine in per Job 11:4 of a malevolent and a capricious God blasphemous and misguided. Job points out the problem of evil and asks that who is to blame for all the evil in the world if it's not God. But he says that he still believes that in spite of that, it's only his job to be a pawn. He says in chapter 13, verse 15, "Though he slay me, yet will I trust him, but I will argue my ways before him. This also shall be my salvation, that a hypocrite cannot come before him." He's not talking back to God. What he wants is to maintain the order, and that as long as he is maintaining the order, he thinks that he can stand before God and give account for himself and not be offensive to God. Job and his friends repeat and expand upon their arguments about the nature of God for about another 30 chapters.
So it really is like a sophist's dialogue.
Yeah. Then Elihu stands up and makes his case about the nature of God. He says that even if it seems like God is malevolent and capricious, we should still act as if we believe that he isn't, and hope that someday he will prove himself to be good and make our suffering worthwhile. Then, in a Deus Ex Machina style, God speaks. So if this is, in fact, a Greek play, this would be the point in the Greek chorus where the God is lowered onto the stage so that he can answer to the people. And God basically says, "I'm bigger than you, I'm smarter than you, and you better do what I say and accept my actions, because you can't possibly fight me." God then berates Eliphaz, Bildad, and Zophar, but not Elihu for their arguments. So it seems that the authors of Job believed that God was probably malevolent and capricious, and that human suffering was unfair and overwhelming, and that the Pharisees were wrong, and that, the suffering of the world was not our fault, it's God's fault. The fact that Job made it into the biblical canon at all may indicate that it was a people's favorite, even if the political elites didn't agree with it, or that it was a good way to control the masses.
So once again, we are seeing the supposedly inerrant Holy Scripture, either written by God or written by people who are inspired by God, once again having a lot of political content, reflecting politics, which would be which is interesting to say the least if you're someone who has the position that they are of godly substance, because they're reflecting very human struggles and power relations.
You know, if this was a kind of morality play that was performed on a regular basis, it's probably would have been a way for the elites to kind of stop people from asking the difficult questions by giving them this long-winded answer, to make it sound like somebody has thought about it, even if it's not these peasants, so they can all get back to their farms.
I don't know, that sounds pretty primitive to me. This is just like the most disempowered person like I've ever heard of.
Interestingly, Ecclesiastes does seem to have some of the same ideas about our place in the universe, although it isn't quite as blatant about the problem of evil, and it uses some of the same phrases and ideas. Ecclesiastes is attributed to Solomon. Consensus of the scholars is that it wasn't written by him. It may have been written by the same authors of Job. It shares several specific phrases that don't occur anywhere else in the Bible, with reference to humans and to our place in the cosmos, and it certainly shares the same idea that life is full of suffering. I went and found a comparison of Ecclesiastes and Job in case you want to learn more, but you're feeling too lazy to go read them both yourself and compare notes, which I will link to. Working on the assumption that they were both written by the same author, or at least the same sect, we can use what Ecclesiastes has to say about women to kind of color in the gaps left by Job. The author of Ecclesiastes describes how he got male and female slaves, how he bred them to get new slaves, how he got male and female entertainers, and that he acquired, quote, the delights of the sons of men, women very many. This probably means concubines. The author of Ecclesiastes doesn't think very highly of women's integrity or intelligence, much like the depiction of Job's wife. It says in Ecclesiastes chapter 7, starting at 26, I find more bitter than death the woman whose heart is snares and nets, and her hands as bands. Whoso pleaseth God shall escape from her, but the sinner shall be taken by her. Behold, this have I found, says Koheleth, adding one thing to another to find out the account, which yet my soul sought, but I found not. One man among 1,000 have I found, but a woman among all those I have not found. Behold, this only have I found, that God made man upright, but they have sought out many inventions. So basically what he's saying here, not even 1%, 0.1% of the male population is extremely virtuous, and that they fear God and they do the right thing. But no women are.
Well, that's really dumb. I mean, seriously. I mean, that's even dumber than... Okay, I just continue.
He's never seen a single good woman. And that when women gain control of things, it's probably going to get you hurt. This may relate to Ecclesiastes chapter 10, verse 20. Curse not the king, no, not in thy thought, and curse not the rich in thy bedchamber. For a bird of the air shall carry thy voice, and that which hath wings shall tell the matter. This is, purely speculation. But the author may have been betrayed by a concubine and landed himself in some difficult financial or social situations after having let something slip after sex. Of course, I can't prove that. It's just an interesting speculation about why the author distrusts women and finds them impious and dangerous.
Continue. I'm just absorbing this. I read this, but I'm just hearing it again. I'm just absorbing this.
So the last book we're going to cover is Song of Songs.
I mean, I just feel like, whatever. I don't know. I'm not the intended audience, though. And to be fair, the intended audience was from the culture of Palestine several thousand years ago. So, of course, it's a miracle that these stories and these characters are relatable at all. I mean, that's the miracle here. It's not the miracle of the Bible itself. It's the miracle that people can still find meaning in them and relate to them, because Jesus Christ... Oh, sorry, we're not there yet. But I do have something to see here. Before we introduce this, okay, this is the way that some Christians and modern day have sold this, okay? the ways that they've sold this. I've never read this, so the quotes are that you're giving, and this introduction is comprehensive. But this is what I've heard about it, and this is how they portray it: that Song of Solomon, or Song of Songs, whatever, is the Christian sex positive tract, and it exalts marital love, and it proves that Christianity and the Bible is not anti-sex, and it's very progressive. That's what I've heard. Basically, they tell me it's like the marital sex book.
It does get a rap as an erotic book, but it is... Oh, there's a lot of stuff in there that is just not. There's a lot of stuff that when you look at it, it's like, what? Song of Solomon is also, or Song of Songs is also attributed to Solomon, but like the last one, chances are very slim that he had anything to do with writing it, if he actually existed. Song of Songs is basically a work of erotic fiction in which a man and a woman, and their friends for some reason, go back and forth about how hot they both are and how good their sex is.
Oh, good. That didn't tell me about that. Now, this is the part that I could relate to, because I can imagine, I've never been in a couple, one of a couple, or a throuple, for that matter, or a duople, or whatever. I don't think duopoly. I don't know, whatever. I've never been in that kind of relationship, but if I was, I could imagine carrying on the way that I normally do, which is talking about sex, and the sex I'm not having, and the sex that I am having with my friends. So this part of the text I could relate to.
The woman mostly seems concerned about interesting him that she's naughty and down to fuck, while the guy is mostly concerned about architecture, interior decorating, and comparing her looks to increasingly bizarre things.
So he gay, basically. No, I'm just kidding. He's probably very, very, very straight. He's in the Bible. Very heterosexual.
So here's a collection of some choice verses with some thoughts on them. She says in chapter 1, verse 6, "My mother's sons were incensed at me. They made me keeper of the vineyards. But my own vineyard, which is probably standing for chastity, have I not kept. Tell me, O thou whom my soul loveth, where thou feedest, where thou makest thy flock to rest at noon. For why should I be as one that veileth herself, or dresses as a shrine prostitute, beside the flocks of thy companions?" He says in chapter 1, verse 16, "Behold, thou art fair, my beloved, yea, pleasant. Also, our couch is leafy. The beams of our houses are cedar, and our panels are cypress." He's got this very bizarre commentary on the house and the room and the couch. He doesn't seem to be paying any attention to her. She says in chapter 2, verse 2, "As a lily among the thorns, so is my love among the daughters. As an apple tree amongst the trees of the wood, so is my beloved among the sons. Under his shadow I delighted to sit, and its fruit was sweet to my taste." I'm doing the slightly voice. So that verse is interesting. She likes to sit down in front of him, and his fruit is sweet to her taste. I think I've worked out that metaphor. He says in chapter 4, verse 2, "Thy teeth are like a flock of ewes, all shaped alike, which come up from the washing, whereof all are paired, and none faileth among them. Thy lips are like a thread of scarlet, and thy mouth is comely. Thy temples are like a pomegranate split open behind thy veil. Thy neck is like a tower of David, builded with turrets, whereon they hang 1,000 shields, all the armor of the mighty men. Thy two breasts are like two fawns that are twins of a gazelle, which feed among the lilies." She says in chapter 6, verse 2, "My beloved is gone down into his garden, to the bed of spices, to feed in the gardens, and to gather lilies." That I'm not sure whether it's him or her, says in chapter 6, verse 11, "I went down into the garden of nuts, to look at the green plants of the valley, to see whether the vine budded and the pomegranates were in flower."
It better not be green. That's a bad sign, girl.
Yeah, green is not a good color. Either their friends or him says, "Thy neck is as a tower of ivory, thy eyes as the pools of Heshbon by the gates of Beth Rabin. Thy nose is as the tower of Lebanon, which looketh towards Damascus.
That's so esoteric, my God.
Thy head upon thee is like Carmel," which is a mountain, "and the hair of thy head like purple." "The king is held captive in the tresses thereof."
What is... Are these people even talking to each other? It just is like, whoosh! It's kind of like the talking across each other, or, you know, like these are two different... and missing each other. These are two different conversations. Excuse me, these are two different monologues.
It does seem as if they're having like two completely different conversations where, you know, she's talking about one thing and he's just off in another corner altogether.
How is this the Christian sex book? They are really they're really misrepresenting that when they write sex. I mean, there have been marital sex manuals based on that Song of Solomon's, or Song of Songs, which is incredible.
And then we get on to the incestuous stuff. He says, or she says rather, "Oh, that thou wert as my brother that sucked at the breasts of my mother. When I should find thee without, I would kiss thee. Yea, and none would despise me.
Your sexy voice is coming out again.
I would lead thee and bring thee into my mother's house, that thou mightest instruct me. I would cause thee to drink of spice wine, of the juice of my pomegranate."
Oh, this is so getting me hot. Or just, even if you've picked them up and you're like your lover and you're just like, you look, your neck is like a tower. That's, okay, so what? Like dusty and like hard, really old and really like dry? Like, that's not even a compliment.
And then her brothers say, "We have a little sister, and she hath no breasts. What shall we do for our sister in the day when she shall be spoken for? If she be a wall, we will build upon her a turret of silver. If she be a door, we will enclose her with boards of cedar." So, I honestly don't know what to make of the overall message of the Song of Songs in relation to women. I guess it could be read as a celebration of women's sexuality.
It's very long-winded. Hers are very direct, which is interesting. Very interesting. Whereas his are kind of like when you take your sleeping pill but you don't fall asleep, you know? I know we both can relate to that. And you start imagining visions and things. Oh, what if your neck was a turret and there was a bunch of shields on it? Ooh!
And therefore... Oh, yep, I can totally relate to that. But yeah, at the end of the day, I'm not really sure about the message of Song of Songs, and especially like what it has to say about women, like whether it's all positive or negative. Somewhat empowering to women. However, it's very unlikely that it was written by a woman.
I wonder why.
And most of the people who copied it for the next few centuries would have been men. And for a good 1,000 or so years, it was virtually all done by monks who had taken vows of chastity.
Exactly. I was going to say, I mean, this basically is very much in tune with what you've just said. It sounds like people who've never gotten anywhere near sex.
It implies that women should be faithful by somewhat dragging, shrine prostitutes through the mud and denigrating them. And half the time, when the woman goes out at night looking for her beloved, she gets roughed up by the guards, which is apparently normal.
That's more of a compliment, I guess. More than your neck is a turret of stone with shields hanging off of it.
And the rest of the time, they just make fun of her a lot. For looking for sex. It's certainly not socially acceptable for her to be sexually liberated. He, on the other hand, has multiple sexual partners. He says there are 60, which is 60 queens, and 80 or 80 concubines, and maidens or slaves without number. However, then there's the problem of keeping it all in the family, and how either her brothers or someone's brothers are concerned about her tits not being big enough and what they can do to make her more sexually attractive, and her comparison of wanting her lover to be her brother so she could kiss him openly and then take him to her mom's house. But thankfully that's it for the Tanakh or Old Testament, so next time we can go on to the Christian Bible or the New Testament.
That only took legit probably, what do you think, a year?
Yeah, it has definitely taken way too long.
We took a year to do it. That actually sounds about right. Wow, it only took us forever. Okay, hello. Hello, New Testament.
But next time we will get on to the New Testament.
Oh, God. They just had to up a Krishna. I think Krishna had 300 gopis or something like that. 700 wives. And there are people that believe this shit. Pat Robertson believes this. Or did. I don't remember if he's alive. 700 wives.
Yeah, and that number is especially ridiculous considering that the entire population of the area was so low.
It was so low. The life expectancy, so low. I mean, you couldn't even produce. I mean, how could a community produce that many women of marriageable age who this person would want to basically bring into the royal family?
Yeah, not to mention that somebody with that level of reproductive success, shall we say, would leave such a lasting impact on the genetics of the region that we would still be able to detect it today. We would be able to look at the genes and see just how many people were descendants of this guy, like we can with Genghis Khan, for example.
And you mean by that a rapist?
Well, yeah, basically, yes.
Successful CE 1453 or 1300, 1320, whatever, is rape a lot. Oh my fucking God, that's insane. That is insane!